Welcome to the Creepin' It Real show, your one-stop shop for weird news, spooky, otherworldly, and paranormal shenanigans. We'll take a dive into what's going on in creepy pop culture. You can follow us on Twitter at creepin_it and like us on Facebook at The Creepin' It Real Show. Do you have a paranormal story you'd like to share with us? You can email us at creepinitrealshow@gmail.com.
So I went down the major rabbit hole reading all this stuff. It was crazy. and I'm really, really excited because now we're recording to do this show, especially the more I got into researching it. I kind of pulled it out of my butt and was like, hey, let's do this. And then I started researching it and I'm like, holy crap, everything is just a computer simulation. So anyway, welcome to Creepin' It Real. I am Christy, and then we also have Yardley. How are you doing this lovely morning?
Hey, I'm doing good. Excited to get into some of this stuff.
Crazy shit. I saw what you were doing, and I saw you had an Ouija board, and I was like, oh God, she's gonna die.
I have a cool story to tell about that, too.
Awesome. Well, go ahead and get into your story, and then Yardley can talk about the dildo that got stuck in a man's butt.
Yeah, I kind of feel like you said you pulled this out of your butt, and I wanted to be like, speaking of pulling things out of our butt, Yardley has a cool story.
It's all related, isn't it?
Rectum damn near killed him.
Rectum.
Okay, I had to go for that. My story, not as funny, but very interesting. My girlfriend and I went to a very old, like 1800s, where a lot of the gravestones said a cemetery, no longer really maintained very well, not the nicest neighborhood. So for practicality, I also brought my pepper spray for the living shitheads. But we went to this old cemetery in Oceanside. Locals will probably know of it. And it's open to the public, so we didn't break into anything. And I was like, Miss Mom, I had a headlamp, just in case our phones didn't work, which they didn't. And I had pepper spray and I had Ouija board. I was just like, I was ready to take shit down because I didn't know what to expect. And sure enough, I was actually happy to have flashlight of some sort because it was really uneven ground. But anyway, so I have the blessing/curse of being an empath, and one section of the cemetery, I couldn't walk over there without crying uncontrollably. And it was so embarrassing because crying is not my jam. And I didn't feel sad. That was the weird thing too, is I'm used to actually catching other people's emotions and I'll actually feel sad or feel mad or whatever. I didn't feel sad, but I was just like, I would walk away. It was like a fun game. I would walk away from that area and I'd be fine. I'd walk back into that area and I'd just start crying. So my friend, while I'm trying to get my shit together, like, don't mind me in this hot mess. It's fine. Fun Friday night. Haven't even been drinking and already crying. She was looking at some other gravestones, so I didn't see the whole cemetery. And she was looking through, and there was a lot of, there were like women who had died the same day as twin babies that were buried next to them, and no husband buried there. So I'm assuming he probably got another family. Really tragic. There were two little girls that were 2 years apart. They were sisters and they died on the same day. So you could tell a lot of tragedy and a lot of different history in this cemetery. So my friend was the one whose idea it was to do the Ouija board. And I was like, well, I'm going to do it, but if I feel anything like unsafe, we're done. So we go over to the area where I had been crying and settled in, and immediately started getting a lot of movement on the Ouija board, and it wasn't spelling anything, but it felt like super playful. Like it was just like, wow, this is a neat tool. I've never seen one of these kind of vibe. And then within a couple minutes of that happening, we're having that conversation, and it starts to get noticeably just in that spot. And it's been 100 degrees out here again. It got cold, and it was like hot night where we could be in shorts and everything. It got cold, and the Ouija board stopped moving, and it was just so weird. I wasn't like possessed, but I just knew what was happening and what to say. And I was just like, okay, so I feel you're an older man. You don't have a nice energy. You're not evil, but you're cranky. And I think we're done talking here. You scared away whomever we were talking to before. And we're done talking here. So we made sure to say goodbye, close it out, tell everything not to follow us, just in case, real firm. And then I got home and I was thinking about it. I was telling my husband, who doesn't believe me, of course. And I was thinking about it, and all of a sudden the name Abigail popped into my head. And I texted my friend and I said, that person we were talking to in the beginning was a young female named Abigail. And she texted back, when you were having your moment, I was overseeing a grave. She doesn't remember what the story was on the stone, but she remembers seeing a young woman named Abigail on the other side. So
nice.
Yeah, that's my glitch in the Matrix. I had a legit experience.
Yeah,
Very cool.
That's pretty cool.
So let's talk about dildos and rectums. On that note.
Let's go ahead and knock this one on.
Let's knock it out.
Yeah. So doctors were forced to invent a new tool when a 23-year-old man in Italy had a 23-inch dildo stuck in his rectum. This guy, he arrives at the emergency room after 24 hours, apparently, of trying to get it out himself.
Oh,
and
I'm just getting the chills right now. God. Oh, God.
Well, he said that the young man said that the toy was inaccessible by hand. So, of course, he had to go to a last resort of getting medical attention. So outside of abdominal pain, and according to the article, it says minor abdominal pain, the man reported no discomfort. So I guess this is something that he was doing a lot of, probably himself. But there's actually in the article, there's a picture of the x-ray that shows it, and it just looks totally insane.
That is a big dildo.
So the doctors applied all of the kind of mainstream methods that doctors use for extraction. So one of the methods was trying to snare it with a wire loop that's normally used for removing potentially cancerous polyps. That didn't work. They attempted to displace the dildo by with a dilating balloon and then grabbing it with a pair of forceps, and that didn't work. So they had to go to the drawing board, and what they ended up doing was making a homemade device that consisted of double wrapped wire inserted into a catheter, and they fashioned it in a way to create a noose that they could grab it and pull it out. So they were able to tighten it. And, I think another one of the problems was, the material that they're made out of, it kind of made it hard with the other ones they had to slip off. So apparently the double wiring, it might have caught one of the veins or something that was one of those dildo veins. And I guess they were able to snag it out. And they pretty much said that after they did the procedure, that the guy wasn't, he wasn't really hurt too much by it. I think the thing that I'm thinking about is how the hell can you go 24 hours?
God, with something that big up your butt.
Yeah, just
you must have had a tolerance. I have no idea.
Yeah, but that's 23 inches is a long ass. That's a long dildo.
Long ass.
2 feet.
I mean, I guess he had to have a long ass for that. That's crazy. That's insane. But the guy apparently is okay, and now the medical profession actually has a technique for this.
Well, thank God.
So, yeah, that's.
So there's that TV show Insatiable. It's not creepy, but it's been a big old thing on Netflix. And I just wanted to mention one of the characters, Alyssa Milano, actually, her character, wanted to invent a tampon with tassels on the end so that you could remove it easily. And I think she's kind of like Tampazzle or something like that. Anyway, and sorry, Yarly, the struggle is real about getting tampons out sometimes.
Yeah.
But, we don't put those up there for fun either. Anyway, I'm just saying that I'm going to invent giant dildos with tassels on the end of them. I haven't decided what to call them yet, but that's what I'm feeling like needs to happen. Dill-tazzle.
If you Google it,
Tazzle.
it probably exists, to be honest with you. And the researchers was basically pointing out that this type of a thing is pretty common, and they said that it's increasing, that people are having these issues and having to get these types of extractions. So this definitely is not an anomaly, according to the researchers.
Wow. Yep, tassels. That's it. Trademark, bitches. Nobody steal my idea. I'll share it with you guys.
Patent pending.
All right, so
lasso on a dildo. I like it.
So, and I'm definitely going to post this on the Facebook page. But what you got, Christy?
Well, I don't know how to follow
I know, right?
24, 23-inch dildos at butts for 24 hours, but I will do my best. So we're going to talk about glitches in the Matrix. And I honestly didn't realize what a glitch in the Matrix snob I am, because when I started to actually read a lot of stories that people talk about saying that they had a glitch in the Matrix, I was like, that's not a glitch in the Matrix. That's an alien abduction. Oh, no, that's not one. That's a ghost or whatever it is that, people were telling their stories in. So I decided as I was reading these glitch in the Matrix stories to, for me, put down the actual, what I feel like are glitches in the Matrix and what that means. And so I came up with 3 categories of glitches in the Matrix that we're going to go over today. Before that, I did post an article for us to read. I didn't read all of it. I just skimmed through it. I thought it was really interesting because it talks about that some people believe we're living in like a computer simulation program. Yeah. And Neil, and I might totally debutcher his name, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I don't know how you say his name. Anyway, he's a smart guy. He's a scientist. He says the odds are at 50-50 that our entire existence is a program on someone else's hard drive.
You know what? I skimmed through it too, and I'm super, I think it's kind of neat how comfortable he and some other scientists that were in the article are with that, because human beings, and myself included, so I'm not knocking it, we so much want to believe that we're important and that we have a place in the grand scheme. And some of these science guys are just like, nope, not only is our life pretty much meaningless, but it's just, on someone else's hard drive. I just think that's kind of an interesting non-human centric approach to looking at the greater, the bigger picture,
Right. And, a couple of years ago, scientists did come out and say, there are other dimensions. That is absolutely a fact. And I think sometimes people are feeling lately that maybe dimensions are crossing over. There are a lot of different things that are possibilities, or it could be all of the above. Who knows? Maybe all the dimensions are the tabs open in our Chrome, and they're just clicking over them and running, typing away and having a grand old time. Who knows? We, of course, aren't going to know until we die. So it's always interesting to talk about. I have my own theory or my own possibilities, and I would hope after this discussion you guys can throw down, your thoughts about it too. So the first one we're going to talk about is doppelgangers, or doubles or people, things that disappear. If you or someone sees another you somewhere else, or something or someone disappears and never reappears, or it shows up after you searched in that spot a million times. It shows up in that spot and you're like, I looked there 20 times, it wasn't there, and then you turn around and it's there. We've got a couple of different stories. I'm going to read the first one because it's not a long one. So, and I'll be talking enough this show, so I'm trying to limit my speaking as much as possible. This person wrote, and I didn't put names on here. Some of them were no longer account holders, so I didn't. Half of them had their names, some of them didn't, so I just decided. And some of these stories are 6 years old, so that's why they're no longer even members of this account. But anyway, this person said, one time my wife and I were coming back from a dinner night out. When I opened the door of the house, she was sitting at the computer working, as I usually find her when I get home. Nothing unusual, except she was entering the house with me. I shrugged it off and carried on. We went to bed and I told her that I saw her sitting at the computer, and she goes dead serious and told me that when I opened the door, she saw herself sitting at the computer working as well.
Nope.
So that's really weird. And
they're cool cucumbers, man. I would have been
I would have been shitting my pants.
I would be like, oh, forgot something out the store. Let's go.
Some people think, oh, I saw it. Oh, I just must have seen it wrong. But then you can't, it's still there in your mind. And you're like, okay, no, I know I saw that. And then you say something and they're like, oh, yeah, we saw it too. And I've heard a lot of different things about doppelgangers. One of them is that it was like a dimension thing, that dimension wires got crossed. I think the one of them that Moni's going to read could possibly be that. But also doppelgangers are known to be like harbingers of like death or warnings.
That's what I'd be like, so I'm gonna die if I saw myself? Fuck that. Like, no.
But usually
changing my name, changing my appearance.
Usually the ones where somebody's just going about their day and they don't seem to be cognizant of you are kind of like, I think, like glitches in the Matrix, where it's a cross-dimensional thing. The ones that look, I actually have a friend who has had for years had trouble with a doppelganger of himself. His niece, he's really close with his aunt and his niece and their family, had one show up at their house, but they knew it wasn't him, and she was freaking out and crying, and they wouldn't answer the door. He came to the door, and it was him, but his face looked like just evil, like mean, like scary. Like he had this snarl on his face, and he just looked like a dangerous man, but it was him. And he knocked and pounded on the door and finally left. And then they had him show up in their car, just appear in the back seat of their car. This had been going on for like decades. And he actually had to go to like a Native American and have like a cleansing and stuff. And it ended up disappearing for a while. And just last year it came back again. So that to me is not like a dimensional thing. That seems like like you're talking about, like evil, like doppelganger, like a demon or a spirit coming after you. Yeah. But then there's ones, like I said, that just kind of seem to be going about their day and don't really know there's two of them hanging around. And then they almost, when they realize it, they kind of freak out as much as you do. But anyway, Yardley, you want to read yours?
Yeah, I was in my living room looking out the window at the street, and I see a neighbor going down the street on her scooter. She's morbidly obese. My living room has two sets of windows separated by a bit of wall, so if anyone walks by, there's a slight gap when you see them. So I was sitting there, she scoots by the first window, there's a beat, and she never appears at the other side. I continue watching both the windows to see if she comes out or turns around, and there's nothing. I get up and go to the window to see the entire street, and she's completely gone. There were no other places to go, as she was on the sidewalk and couldn't scoot past the grass, and she couldn't go onto the street because she'd trip over the curb. She would tip over the curb. Her two directions were left further up the street, or right back where she came. She disappeared and was gone. She was disappearing. She was disappeared and was going neither. That makes no sense. Yeah. So, however, anyway, I even went outside to see if there was someone else I missed that she could have gone. Nothing. She went past my window and was promptly deleted from existence. Now, this person obviously did not type this up very well. Mm-hmm. I was trying to add some comments here and there while we was doing the doc, but that's a weird situation. You know, I've actually myself has had a situation that was seemingly like that, where somebody had walked past me and I was kind of looking at them, you know, to see them on the other side, blah, blah, blah. And it never happened before. It just never happened. And it was really some of the most weirdest thing. Or you see someone and then you turn the corner. I think we were talking about this earlier, and they're gone. I think that those are the weirdest things. And I kind of put it in the category of, you might be driving on a long trip and you might be planning your moves 3 or 4 cars ahead. And then you end up in front of a pack of people and you're like, I don't even remember passing these people.
Yeah.
That's happened to me a few times. So I think that this is something that's probably a common occurrence. I would have to say that I've had a few other people that have told me that something similar has happened. So I think that this one kind of resonates a little bit more with me.
If you go on to actually some of these stories I got off of the Reddit. There's a Reddit forum called Glitch in the Matrix, which I didn't know until I started doing this research. And it's really interesting because these stories, they'll tell the story and then you get everybody commenting. And then you'll, of course, get even more people telling their own stories of, again, like you, where they read it and they go, oh my gosh, I had the same thing happen. And so, and the reason why I like telling these stories and they're not always well written is because they're not always well written. I really don't think these are like storytellers. These people are actually talking about their experiences, and they seem pretty genuine and real. Sometimes you read some and you're like, whatever, you're just making shit up, because they're like, it was 10 years ago, and they're just like super dramatic about it, and you're like, okay, like,
another reason why I think I kind of gravitating to, feeling like I can relate to a lot of these. I think just a lot of people probably have experienced something like that, but I don't, for me, I want to think that it has something more to do with us neurologically. Like, I don't know. There's a lot we don't know about how the brain works, but nevertheless, it is sometimes just really weird. And sometimes I guess it could be upsetting. Just like you were mentioning, Chrissy, about maybe having some keys or putting something down and you're like, I just looked in that place.
Yeah.
Times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
yep.
But anyway, I definitely, I'm with you. I kind of like this because these are things that, even though they're really hard to explain, it's something that I think a lot of people can say, that's happened to them.
Yeah. And I read a lot of them where literally they put something down and it never ever came back, like keys or a purse or something really weird and random that just disappeared and never reappeared ever again. Like, to this day, they're like, I lost this. It was right there. It was in my face. I blink, I turn around, it's gone, and I never found it again. And it's just bizarre. It's like, how does something never ever show up again?
And even though these things do happen time to time, I've probably had more instances where I'm looking for something that's already in my hand,
right?
More than this type of thing happening, but it's definitely relatable.
Exactly. Shoot, I've been looking for my phone, and then I'm on my phone, or I call my phone from my phone. Oh yeah. Or be something dumb like that. But to actually disappear and like never ever appear again, and it's something that you see every day or you use every day. It's something that was right there. You put it right there. There are quite a few stories like that on there that people had talked about. So definitely could be. I mean, you could categorize that if you wanted to believe in the whole thing anyway, of like ghosts, because spirits have been known to take things. When I was growing up, we lived in a haunted house, and there was a little boy spirit, and he loved to take shit. But we'd find it. It'd be in like a pile in my closet or on the bed or something later. Like, it was never show up. But I don't know. Anyway, Moni, would you like to read your story? This is an interesting one, I thought.
This one's pretty cool. So last summer, my car was in the shop for quite a while, so I had to depend on rides from friends and such to get around. One morning, my housemate woke me up saying there was some guy at the door looking for me. I tossed on some clothes and went to see who it was. This man? I'd never seen him before in my life. Made me real nervous, too, because even though he seemed friendly, the fact that he knew my name and where I lived, well, I thought maybe he was a stalker customer from work or something worse. Turns out he insisted I take $40 from him. According to him, I'd loaned him money the night before at a nearby gas station, and as promised, he was paying me back. Only I had not been to a gas station. In fact, at the time he said we'd met, I'd actually been at work. He looked at me like I was nuts and said all this, and eventually just told me, okay, well, I don't know, but you gave me your address to mail you a check, but since you live close by, I just decided to pay you in cash. In the end, I took the money. Why not? Free $40, yay. But I was sort of freaked out. Maybe this guy was a stalker and this was some sort of elaborate ruse to meet me, right? But then this happened. 3 days later, I had my car again after forever. I stopped at a nearby gas station but paid inside because I wanted bottled water too. There was one guy in front of me in line arguing with the cashier. Apparently, he wanted to put $30 in gas into his truck to buy a pack of cigarettes, but his credit card kept being declined. The stranger, who looked nothing like the stranger from a few days earlier, was begging for a break. He'd leave his phone, his wallet, anything as collateral. He just needed the gas to go home really quick and get some cash, and he'd be right back to pay, but the cashier refused. Finally, I just said, that's like $40, right, for gas and cigarettes? Yep. I ended up giving him the same two $20 bills from the first stranger, who had given me, the first stranger had given me a few days earlier. He kept saying, bless you, what's your name? I'll pay you back. Where do you live? I swear I'll pay you back right away. I was so freaked out by the coincidence/strangeness of it all that I decided to break the circle. I gave him a fake name and told him he could pay me back the next day at a store I don't work at. Was that bitchy of me? I don't know. All I know is I felt like I had to break the loop, or else I might forevermore be meeting a stranger who either had $40 to give me or $40 to take. Never saw either of those gentlemen again, by the way.
So somebody commented in this story, and I should have put it on here. I kind of forgot. The person said maybe that's what you did before. So the guy that showed up to give her the money, maybe that somebody did that to her. Like, does that make sense?
Somebody
and
did
so
that to
she,
him.
so she like actually continued the cycle, but to somebody else instead of herself. So she broke the circle for her, but continued it forward with somebody else, because now this person's going to give it to a stranger, and then the cycle's going to move on where then that person's going to give it. Like, so they were like, well, maybe you just continued it instead of broke it.
Maybe, yeah.
But anyway, I thought that was really interesting. I mean, what are really the odds of something like that happening? I mean, think about it. It wasn't even the same person. They were two totally different people. So that one is really interesting. This is the one that freaked me out, Yardley. The one that you're about to read. This one's freaky.
Okay. My dad used to get up around 3 a.m. every morning for work. Starting at a very early age, I would wake up on my own and wander downstairs to see him before he left. One morning when I was about 4 years old, I made it to the bottom of the stairs and noticed that the front door was ajar. I opened it up and saw my father in his favorite work shirt making his way down the driveway to his truck in his typical work outfit, which was a plaid shirt and Dickies. I swung the door open wide and yelled for him to come back for a hug before he left. He slowly turned around and just stared at me and started walking back towards the house. He was looking so strangely at me that it started to scare me, and I started crying and asking what was wrong. Just as he had almost reached me, a pair of arms encircled me from behind in a bear hug. I turned around and I saw my understandably freaked out father staring at his own doppelganger in the exact same outfit.
No fucking way.
I have the chills when you're reading this. I am covered in chills right now. It just freaks me the fuck out, man.
The double took one look at my dad and ran down the driveway. Meanwhile, my dad yanked me in the house and locked the door. Weirdest morning ever. I never did quite figure that one out. I would not trust my 4-year-old memory of the event if it wasn't also witnessed by my father. And he said that they don't really talk about it these days, but his mom has since told him that his father had actually called out of work and spent the rest of that day reassuring himself that he wasn't a nutcase. So that's a pretty odd one.
That's insane.
Yeah, I wouldn't leave the house. I'd lock all my shit and hide in a bunker.
I've never seen anything that I guess could be considered a doppelganger event. I've seen other people, in different places, or sometimes maybe even another state, that looks exactly like somebody that I know, but I've never had an instance that was like what this young man was saying had happened to him. That's gotta be kind of, I don't know, that's kind of weird. I think that this is the best one so far. But that's one of those things where you have to ask yourself, is it just your 4-year-old imagination? But I think the co-signing that he got was when his mom had actually told him that his dad was, trying to reassure himself that he wasn't in that case. But I would have had to walk that thing down. Like, I don't know. I would have put my kid in the house, and then I would have been too freaked out not to check this out.
Yeah. I think, and in that story, it almost seems like, because let me tell you something. Once you read all these stories, it's gonna like fuck with you. Like, you're gonna keep thinking about it because it's just weird. And I think that maybe the other guy, I think these were like cross streams. Like, he's probably looking at this kid because maybe in another dimension, his kid is either doesn't exist, or You know what I mean? Like, or he had just saw his kid, or his kid wasn't there that day at the house, and so he turns around and he sees this child standing in his doorway, and he's like, "What in the world?" You know? And he's walking forward, and just as freaked out. So I think everyone was freaked out. He took off running down the driveway, going, "What the hell's going on?" When he sees himself. Same thing for the other guy. Like, how bizarre would that be?
Well, what's more bizarre to me, if there's another dimension, I wouldn't want to be living in the same fucking house I'm in now. I would hope that I'd be doing some other shit. But
No.
yeah, but this one's I think if any one of these is one that would be kind of creepy. I don't even know if it's creepy. I think that it's weird, but also it's weird through the mind of a 4-year-old. So
Yeah.
you know.
I think it would be crazy from a parent. I mean, from a grown man who's hearing his kid, crying at the door, and looks out the door, and there's you walking towards your kid. It would be like, what? No. Am I in a dream? I mean, that would be crazy. No. But anyway, so the other number 2 of our glitches in the Matrix is really interesting, and I had never heard of it until I started reading these. And let me tell you, this sounds crazy, and these stories are gonna blow your wig back. But what's really weird is when you go in there, and these people are desperate. They're like ready to check themselves into a mental institution. They think they're crazy. They're like trying to figure out what's wrong. And this is really the only place they know to talk about it, because they're afraid to say it to anybody else or people they know, or go to a doctor, and are just trying to understand what happened. And the one I didn't put in here was really weird, because it was this guy who woke up, he's Norwegian, and one of his favorite singers, who he had just gone to his concert last year, he woke up one morning to find out he died 20 years ago. And he's like, I was just at his concert last year. And he did all this work. Like, he was a really bad person 20 years ago, like kept getting into trouble. And then he turned his life around, got married, started doing all these like kid charities and stuff to help kids, because he was a fucked up kid and had a bad situation. And so then turned it around and started doing all these things. Well, no. He died in like 1997 or 1999, and he's losing his shit. This guy is like, I just went to his concert last year. He also owned a record store apparently, and he went to the record store and talked to the guy and bought an album from him and posted a picture of the album. He then got on there and started wrote down lyrics of the music, because he kept making music, after he supposedly died in this guy's reality. And he named the albums that the guy made. He named he wrote music down. He played the guitar, and he was obsessed with the music. This guy was absolutely losing his shit, and he did not know what to do, and he didn't know how to handle it. And he was like totally freaking out. And it was so weird. I didn't put it on there, but I wanted to mention it because I didn't know the guy, the singer, so because it was a Norwegian black metal singer that he was talking about, and everybody's like, who knew it, was like, yeah, oh yeah, he died 20 years ago, and man was like, no, he didn't. Like, I just went to his concert. It was so crazy to read, but he was completely losing his shit, like these stories. So, what a lot of people call this is quantum immortality, which means if multiple universes exist, then a conscious being can never truly die, because in any situation where you are killed, the reality in which you weren't killed gets superimposed, and you continue living in that alternate reality. Whoa. So, really bizarre. It's actually a quantum physics conversation that they have, and they call it quantum immortality. So, we're going into number 2 of our glitches in the Matrix. Mooney?
Rewind back to September 2015. I was a freshman who had just entered high school 2 weeks prior. Already school was weighing down on me, and I had been continuing a habit I had of going on walks to clear my mind. On this day, I had been walking around a pond near my house. There's a trail that goes around the pond, and then the trail leads up to a set of abandoned train tracks on the other side, which stood about 15 feet above the path and the pond below. After walking the circle, I was crossing the train tracks and decided I wanted some ice cream. The fastest way to get to the ice cream shop was to take a path below the train tracks. But there isn't any way to cross the pond without going all the way back around. And being 14 years old, I decided I could just jump from the tracks down to down to the path below and keep walking. Looking down from above, it didn't seem to be that far of a jump, so that's what I did. The next thing I remember after that was being half conscious in an ambulance. Everything was extremely blurry, and the paramedics sounded slightly panicked. I wasn't able to move either of my legs, so I think they were broken. The scene continued for a few minutes until we arrived at the hospital, and I was wheeled into the emergency room on a stretcher. I only had a few minutes and emerged before I eventually lost all consciousness, and that was the last thing I saw. After I'd been unconscious for what felt like about an hour, I opened my eyes and I was on the ground. I'd just hit the ground after jumping, but this time I was fully conscious. I hadn't noticed this before I jumped, but there was a car parked watching me. I think they thought I was attempting suicide. It probably looked that way. And the people in it had jumped out and called an ambulance for me. The ambulance ride had been the exact same as it was the first time, and I was put into the emergency room that I had died in before. The only difference between the two events was that I was fully conscious this time, and my injuries were much more minor. I was discharged from the hospital the same night with only stitches in my lip and a slightly fractured jaw and a mild concussion. For a while after this, I assumed the first scenario had just been a weirdly coincidental dream that I'd had while unconscious, so I didn't consider it anything abnormal. It wasn't until a few weeks later when my mom told me the people who had helped me said that I had been conscious the entire time. I hadn't been knocked out after hitting the ground or anything. So that entire scenario managed to happen in a few seconds, and it took me to hit the ground while I was still conscious. I'm 17 now, and I still have no way to explain what happened that day other than that I died and I was given a second chance.
So when he thought he was asleep for an hour dreaming he died, the people that watched him do it say he never lost consciousness the whole time. So he thinks that what he remembers, he was just, thrown into another dimension where he didn't die. And now, bizarreness. So anyway, very bizarre. So go for it, Yardley. Read yours.
Okay, well, my last semester at college, I was assaulted by a football player for walking where he was trying to drive. While unconscious on the ground, I lived a different life. I met a wonderful young lady. She made my heart skip and my face red. I pursued her for months and dispatched a few jerk boyfriends before I finally won her over. After 2 years, we got married, and almost immediately, she bore me a daughter. I had a great job, and my wife didn't have to work outside of the house. When my daughter was 2, she bore me another son. My son was the joy of my life. I would walk into his room every morning before I left for work and doted on him with my daughter. One day while sitting on the couch, I noticed that the perspective of the lamp was odd, like inverted. It was still in 3D, but just wrong. It was a square lamp base, red with gold trim and 4 legs and a white square shade. I was transfixed. I couldn't look away from it. I stayed up all night staring at it. The next morning, I didn't go to work. Something was just not right about that lamp. I stopped eating. I left the couch only to use the bathroom at first. Soon I stopped that too, as I wasn't eating or drinking. I stared at the fucking lamp for 3 days before my wife got really worried. She had someone come and try to talk to me. By this time, my cognizance was breaking up and my wife was freaking out. She took the kids to her mother's house just before I had my epiphany. The lamp is not real. The house is not real. My wife, my kids, none of that is real. The last 10 years of my life are not fucking real. The lamp started to grow wider and deeper. It was still inverted dimensions. It took up my entire perspective, and I could see the red. I heard voices, screams, all kinds of weird noises, and I became aware of pain, a fucking shit ton of pain. The words I said were, "I'm missing teeth." And I opened my eyes. I was laying on my back on the sidewalk, surrounded by people that I didn't know. Lots were freaking out. I was completely confused. At some point, a cop scooped me up, dragged me across the sidewalk and grass and threw me face down in the back of a cop car. I was still so confused. I was taken to the hospital by the cop. Seems he didn't want to wait for the ambulance to arrive and give me CT scans. I went through about 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children and dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going to go insane as I would cry myself to sleep, hoping I would never see her in my dreams. I never have. But sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He is perpetually 5 years old, and I can never hear what he says. Now, this one's interesting because to me, this sounds like some old fiction somebody
Yeah.
wrote.
Yeah.
So when I have chills reading this because everybody who goes on to the Glitch in the Matrix and reads stories, they all refer these people to this story. This is one of the first stories that people came on there. And I went back and read, and he has since deleted his profile, but it was like 7 years ago that he wrote this. And people went in there and started commenting and trying to get him, to calm down. And he was unconsolable. Like for him, it's like his whole family died. Like he still had love for them. Like he loved them. They were his children and his wife. And he was a grown man in this life. And then this lamp just all of a sudden appeared, and it was weird, and he couldn't understand why. And then he realized somewhere in his consciousness, this wasn't real. And he gets thrown back into what really happened. And he was grieving for years, grieving the loss of his family that never existed. And that he doesn't know if they existed or not. Like he thinks maybe he went into another dimension. He doesn't know what happened. And people were trying to, literally talking to him down off the fucking cliff. Like, he was absolutely inconsolable. And he didn't know. He said he did tell one of his doctors, and his doctor looked at him like he was fucking crazy, And he never told anybody else. And then years later got on Reddit because he's like, I need to talk about this. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm depressed. I can't operate my life because all I can think about is my children and my wife. And crazy. I thought that was insane.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, it's going to be okay, And he's like, I know you probably think I'm crazy, but I don't have anywhere else to talk about this. I'm ready to go to a mental institution or kill myself. Like, he didn't know what to do.
It's really sad.
Really
Either
crazy.
way, whether it actually happened or he's severely mentally ill, that's really sad.
What if, we have kids. What if we woke up tomorrow and this was all a dream? Like,
after the vacation, I'd be very sad.
Anyway, so here's another one. This one was really interesting, but she is she lives in Sweden, so her English isn't the best. And if you ever want to go on here and see this, she still to this day will get on there and comment and talks about what, everything. And she answered everybody's questions and was very candid about the whole thing. And I thought it was a fascinating story. She says, I was born with a heart condition that makes my heart beat very fast sometimes, and it sometimes also ends up in a sort of a heart attack. On a few occasions when this happens, I obviously end up at the emergency room and get hospitalized for a few days. A few years back, I got this sort of heart attack. In the ambulance on my way to the hospital, I could feel that I was going to die and made peace with it. Not because I wanted to die, but because I was ready and... not because I wanted to die, but I was just ready and not scared at all. A few hours later, having no idea if my heart stopped and if I died, I woke up and wasn't feeling very good. But something was different. I had the strangest feeling in my gut, and I could just tell something was off. Like I was trapped in someone else's body, only that it was my body. It's very hard to explain, but maybe you guys get it. Anyway, I didn't have my phone with me, and I wanted to call my boyfriend to tell him what happened and that I was okay. The only numbers I had in my head was his, my dad's, and my sister's. I got a hold of a phone and dialed my boyfriend's number. When he picked up the phone, I felt like a heartwarming relief hearing his voice. I started talking quickly, telling him something like, Hi, it's me. I just wanted to tell you I had problems with my heart again. I'm at the hospital and everything is fine now. I was expecting an answer sort of like, I'll be there as soon as I can. But what I got was, listen, I'm sorry that you're in the hospital and it sounds like you really know me, but I have no idea who this is. And I thought he was joking with me. So I told him, it's me, Lisa, your girlfriend. I cooked dinner for you and your daughter like 2 days ago. Come on, stop joking. And he said, with the most serious voice ever, I am married to blah, 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 and I don't know who you are. Please don't ever call me again. I was shocked. I couldn't understand what was going on. I knew he had divorced his ex-wife a few years before we met, so I could not understand at all what was going on. When I got back home, stuff in my apartment was different. Some stuff was missing or had changed places. Pictures and paintings and things. I decided to Facebook my boyfriend, and we weren't even friends on there anymore, and it still said he was married to his ex-wife. Had I imagined being his girlfriend? Spending time with his daughter? No way. I knew stuff about him and his daughter that I could in no possible way know if we hadn't have dated. I still had the feeling of being in the wrong body, that something was very wrong, and I still have to this day. And I thought about this so much. My theory is that I did die, and I somehow woke up in almost the same life, but in another dimension. I know it's crazy. Most of my life is the same when it comes to my family. Some memories that I have seems like I'm the only one that have had them. In my old life, my mom died when she was 44, but in this life, she died when she was 50, so it looks like she got a few more years here. After losing my boyfriend that I still love deeply, in waking up in this, what seems to me, other world and other life, I have struggled with depression in dealing with figuring this out. About 2 months ago, I signed up on Tinder, and my boyfriend showed up on there. We matched and are currently dating. He has no memory of me, while I have 6 months of memories of us in love and having an amazing time together. He said he recognizes my voice, but he can't place me. I haven't told him yet, and I don't know if I will. He will probably think I'm psycho. So when she was writing this, her apparent dying happened 3 years ago. And so she went 2.5 years and then, or so, maybe 3 years, and then matched with this guy on Tinder. And so she went back, and then actually people were asking her a million questions, and she said that she just out of nowhere signed up for Tinder, and he was on there. And so she was like, oh, he must have finally got divorced. Like, she had remembered him getting divorced before, and matched with him. And, you know, and she said her boyfriend's told her that he's drawn to her and he doesn't know why, and she thinks they're like soulmates. And everybody was asking her a ton of questions, and she answered them all very well. And it was interesting to hear the story. And she said, like, she has memories of her family going on vacations that they never took in this world. And they talk about things that they did that she doesn't remember doing. It's really weird. And she said that her everything seems to be like 2 or 3 years in delay here. Everything. Like, so very bizarre.
Broke my brain.
I know. Isn't it crazy? I had to look up how to even explain this, because I'm like, how do you even explain this thing? And that's when I found that it actually has that name, quantum immortality. And it was fascinating to me. There's a lot of these stories on there of people talking about like what's different. And these are things, and just like the first one where it's one person or two people experiencing something. But now that we're moving on to number 3, these are literally hundreds to millions of people remembering something very vividly that doesn't seem to be the case here and now. So, and it's called the Mandela effect. I'm sure we've all heard of that. And that means the phenomenon where it is discovered that a global, well-known fact has apparently changed for a large group of people. The effect and name refers to people remembering Nelson Mandela dying in prisons in the 1980s, when he actually survived long after his release from prison. So this is one that... What's that? Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. I got your reply, Monty. Okay. So this is an interesting one that I vividly remember this movie. So I don't know what to think of this. And you will
remember this movie. Yeah.
You will get people that will swear to death, and they fight with people. They will fight online, and like they're like swear up and down this movie happened, and they get angry when you try to tell them that they don't know what they're talking about. So Yardley, let's talk about this movie.
All right. If you were a kid or a teenager growing up in the 90s, you might remember a movie called Shazam. with popular television comedian Sinbad playing the principal role of a genie. As the plot goes, two children, a preteen boy and his younger sister, find a genie in a lamp and decide to use their wishes to restore love to their single father's life. It's a comedic tale involving the genie and children who use their three wishes for domestic activities, often failing comically. The culmination of the movie takes place at a pool party related to the father's work, in which the children successfully use their final wish to make their father happy. What a marvelously cheesy ending. Some of you reading this might be nodding, recalling having watched the movie. And you are not alone. There is a large community of people who can remember quite vividly watching this movie with their friends and family. So what seems to be the problem? Well, the movie Shazam does not exist, and it never has. The rumor of its existence has gained so much traction that even Sinbad himself had to set the record straight on Twitter. A reasonable explanation is that people are simply mistaking it with the 1996 movie Kazam, in which Shaquille O'Neal plays a genie and helps a teenage boy who happens to have a single mother, similar how the children in the alleged Shazam had a single father. When the theory was presented that people were simply mistaking the movie Shazam for Kazam and the like, the people who claimed to remember Shazam pushed back, vehemently claiming that they were well aware of the Shaq movie Kazam and were certain that Shazam was a separate movie that preceded it. Yes. One woman named Meredith, who was interviewed on the subject, claimed, "I remember thinking Shaq's Kazam was a ripoff or a revamp of a failed first run, like how the 1991 film Buffy the Vampire Slayer bombed, but the late 90s TV reboot was a sensation. I am one of the several people who specifically never saw Kazam because it looked ridiculous off the rip. Shazam, just a few years after it had been released. Additionally, there was reference to Shazam on a TV show called A Different World that aired from 1997 to 1993, in which Sinbad played Coach Walker Oates. In a particular scene in season 5, episode 13, the character Freddy is trying to hide a scarf with the initials SZ on it, and that she is making for her boyfriend, Shaza Zulu. But when they discover it and ask what SZ stands for, she responds that it could be for someone who loves Shazam. Now, there's something interesting about this, because something that I think is adding to some of these people's memories, like in the 70s, there was Captain Marvel and there was a show called Shazam. It's a comic book character. So you have that, and then you have, these other, I just think the names are kind of,
But I vividly have remembered the cover of the videotape. I remember it. I remember Sinbad was wearing a genie hat, and he had like a fade haircut, and he had his arms crossed to the side, and there was a boy standing on the other, back to him, and it said Shazam on the top. And it looks nothing like the one that Shaq is on. I mean, it was a purple cover, but it didn't have the ombre effect that the cover has on the Shaq one. I also looked, and he did play like a genie looking turban guy, but that's not it either. Like, he posted it and he goes, "Oh, I found what happened here. I was in this show for kids, played this person with a turban," and I'm like, "Nope, that's not it either. I know that cover. Like, I remember it very clearly, very vividly."
And that cover does not exist on the internet.
He says
that's because it never
now,
exists.
like Chrissy said it.
But the thing is that people, every single person that I've read, because I remembered it on my own, and then when I started reading people describing the cover, it was exactly the way I remembered it. So it's like, what is it that, we're talking thousands of people saying they remember the exact same thing that I remember. And that is so weird. And I never saw Kazam. I never watched that movie. And I remember Shazam. And I remember that movie. And I know it was Sinbad, and I know it wasn't Shaq. I know the difference between the two very well. It's crazy.
Hey, now, but even Sinbad came out and said that all of y'all were crazy.
Yeah, but the thing is, that's what's called the Mandela effect.
Sinbad says it.
Is that they think that people that this is happening to, because there's several of these instances where people swear that they remember something different, is that two dimensions have crossed, and a group of people remember things, the past, differently. Like, they remember another movie that existed. And we'll get down into some more examples, yeah.
Another instance that it occurred, and it's actually not on this document, was Berenstein versus Berenstein, the Berenstein Bears.
Berenstain and Berenstein. And I remember Berenstein Bears.
Well, they've traced that glitch back to what year you were born, what years you would have basically been in contact with those books, as a child. And to the point where people have complained that like they've gotten in trouble at school or things like that because they spelled it wrong, and they were like, no, that's the way it's spelled, and they remember seeing the book a different way. So
yeah,
super interesting. And to the point where if you look it up, there's a whole big old thing about how it's actually spelled and what year you would have to between what ages you would have to be born to remember it a certain way. It's super crazy. But also this one that Christy has is, according to millions of people, Billy Graham died 3 times. When Billy Graham died one final time in February 2018 at the ripe old age of 99, millions took to the internet to comment that they distinctly remember him passing at least once, if not twice before, around the year 2000 from heart problems, with a funeral with Clinton speaking. The church was powder blue and navy, and CNN covered it extensively. The second time was around 2014 from Alzheimer's. Several U.S. presidents spoke at the funeral, and George W. Bush cried. Many say they remember both of these deaths. They remember him dying in 2000 and being shocked hearing he had died in 2014 because they thought he'd died in 2000. So imagine all the surprise when it was announced one final time, we think, that he passed from a heart attack in 2018. The ones that remember vividly him passing before 2018 are not going to let you tell them differently. Their memories are real, and they refuse to accept anything different.
So real quick, I remember the 2000 passing. I actually wrote what the funeral, the church interior was powder blue and navy, and there was a white cover, a blanket, like satin thing draped over his casket. I remember that vividly. So I don't remember the one in 2014. So anyway, I wrote that. And then as I went and looked, a lot of people described that yes, they remember it being, there was blue interior and there was this white satin blanket. They like spent a whole day on CNN, covering the funeral. So, and then some more people heard in 2014 that he died, and they were confused because they're like, no, he died in 2000. Some people didn't hear that. Like, I didn't hear that. I don't remember that at all. But I did hear this year when he died, and I'm like, what? He died in like 2000. So really weird how that works. Anyway, this is somebody telling you a story, commenting that they're saying, no, that's not true, and this is how I remember it. So go ahead.
Yes, so the person recalls, let me reiterate for the 100th time, it was not anybody but Billy Graham that died in my memory in May 2000. It wasn't Oral Roberts, it wasn't Falwell. Billy Graham was a respectable evangelist whose mission seemed genuine to me. Those other preachers are snake oil hucksters in my eyes. It wasn't until Bill Graham of Bill Graham Presents, concert promoter, not evangelist. It certainly wasn't Ronald Reagan or any politician, actor, musician, or concert promoter. I was still a teenager when the promoter, Bill Graham, died in the 90s. I've been to a few Bill Graham Presents concerts in the Bay Area back in the day. I know what I'm talking about. There were memorials on CNN and the networks that went into depth about Billy Graham's life. I learned things about Billy Graham that were entirely specific to Billy Graham. It was not Reagan, it was not Falwell. Neither of these people went to Western Bible College or had sons named Franklin, and Bill Jr. Reagan died when I lived in a different apartment by myself. Billy Graham died in 2000 when I was living in a house with roommates, a house that was torn down around 2002. Aerial photographs will confirm this. The amount of focused negativity against those who mention this specific ME is
Mandela
telling.
effect. Yeah, that's what that means. Yeah.
Someone really doesn't want to remember this one for whatever reason. Too late. Well, I had heard about this too, and it could be Mandela effect, but I was kind of wondering if they faked Billy Graham's death for some reason or another. So that's maybe kind of a weird conspiracy theory that I'm just floating. But here's, excuse me, some other people's memories. Say what you will. I know he died. I was there. I lived in the mountains of North Carolina and knew him well. I met him more than once and even went to school with his nephew. I operated a restaurant across the street from his retreat, the Cove. The day he died from Parkinson's disease was no surprise as his health was failing rapidly, but my wife and I were devastated. She even remembers the city blocking off the streets of town for the occasion. Within months, they renamed the very street I worked to Billy Graham Parkway. Prior to his death, he was a very visible person, and if I had seen him on the news after his death, I would have surely noticed, but there's been nothing about him for years. Now I learn he's just fine at 97, still living at Montreat, and now there's no record of a parkway that with the name west of Charlotte. This is my number one Mandela effect. No one can convince me otherwise. Keep up the good work.
So this guy wrote this a year ago. And this was before he died. So then he wrote this saying that he knows he died. So then he was confused when he died in 2014. And he's arguing that no, he died in 2000. And then he actually dies in 2018. So he's still talking whenever the guy is still alive, thinking that he died. So here's another one.
So Billy Graham's death puzzles me. I remember it occurring a few months before Ronald Reagan's death. My mother and I sat on our little 13-inch monitor in the kitchen with flashes at the bottom screen about Billy Graham's death. In attendance was George Sr. to the left of Jr., Bill Clinton to the right in blue-covered chairs. The casket draped in a white cloth was paraded in front of the former presidents. As it was carried up the aisle, I remember his son, widow, and Bill Clinton speaking. It was held outdoors in North Carolina. That day was very vivid, and my mother remembers it as well.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah, sure.
So we have one more. Actually, we have another one that I discovered this morning that I'm really confused. So Queen's We Are the Champions, the song. Mm-hmm. I vividly remember the very last lyrics of that song. He says, "We are the champions," and then he says, "of the world." So apparently, now that does not exist, and he does not say "of the world." And people have found...
Yes, he does.
He only says it, the only time he ever said it for a lot of people is in some concert in some place, and everybody's like, oh, that must be the version you've heard all the time. And people are like, I've never been to that concert.
It's the recorded version,
No, if you play the recorded version now, he does not say that.
What? The actual... Okay, so you just broke me, and
I'm telling you that it's really weird. So I was like, of course he says "we of the world." Like, of course. And no, he doesn't. And people are now, that's the biggest one. So but here's the one that I'm going to talk about. Mona Lisa's smile, which way? Which I actually posted on our Facebook and Twitter. We had quite a few answers on our Facebook, and I would say it was 50-50. 50% got it wrong and 50% got it right. Now, I got it wrong. When I first put it up, I didn't know either. And then I actually went to give the answer, and I was wrong. So the newest Mandela effect is now regarding which rendition of Mona Lisa is correct. Which photo of Mona Lisa is the legit one? So one was created from someone that remembers how Mona Lisa looked and refuses to accept the actual famous painting by Leonardo da Vinci currently is the right one. Hundreds overwhelmingly chose the wrong painting as the imposter. Many fought about the validity until they looked up the actual painting and saw with their own eyes they were wrong. So which one, looking at these photos, do you think is the right Mona Lisa? The left or the right?
The one that's not smiling.
Yeah.
You're wrong.
The one on the right.
You're wrong.
Nuh-uh.
You're wrong. It's
Weird.
the one on the left. And
I mean, there's that Mona Lisa smile is like a...
It's like
saying.
that commercial, like where they manipulate it or whatever, and that's what I was thinking of as far as a smiling one. Maybe that's what I'm thinking about. But I thought that the original Mona Lisa didn't have a smile. But
and that's what everybody said, is that they said no, the smile is in her eyes. That was always like the mystery of the Mona Lisa, was that when you look at her mouth, she's not smiling, but when you look at her eyes, she seems to be smiling, and that is not true. And I don't remember a veil on her head either. But when you look up, I actually was like, I don't believe this. And I actually looked up the Louvre picture. And sure enough, it's the one of her wearing the veil and the smirk. And your friend Carrie got it wrong. And she's probably been to the Louvre 3 times. So I was shocked that she even guessed it wrong on Facebook, Yardley. So some people think that... So here's possibilities if you want to believe there is a Mandela effect happening right now and what's really going on. There's a lot of choices, but here's the top 4. Reality is a computer simulation, and the AI running the show or the programmers are trying to drive us crazy with random changes. 2, which I find this one really interesting, and I've actually started reading up. There's actually 3 giant particle colliders that exist now. But the CERN particle collider, the HARDEN, is messing with the fabric of space-time, creating wormholes and rifts. That is a very, very big possibility because the particle colliders we have no idea what they can potentially do, and they're incredibly powerful. And people are just fucking around with them. So, other one is the D-Wave computer, which is a quantum computer, would be possibly doing the same. Some people think that it's a Christian Jesus thing. A future cataclysm is rippling backward in space-time, reversing casualty mode and inciting parallel timelines in the multiple universe to merge. To the fundamentalist Christians, this event is the second coming of Jesus. To the rest of us, it's more likely some kind of cosmic event of unknown origin. Either way, the idea is the future is corrupting timelines in the past. So if you want to really believe that this is possibly something that happened, then those are our possibilities of why it's happening. My personal opinion is Mandela is in full effect, y'all. Of course, I'm going down the rabbit hole. In my opinion, reality isn't as solid as one thinks it is. Memory is never 100% accurate, but as I always say, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah.
These changes in our collective reality don't change the outcomes of our life, but they do show that as we move along, things can be altered. People seem incredibly threatened by the possibility of reality being flimsy enough to shift everything from corporate logos, famous movie lines, song lyrics, and death dates. In my view, it means we are collectively waking up from a dream, one that fools our minds into believing that reality is immutable and concrete instead of fluid and fickle. We are all about to discover that the world of our senses and the mind's interpretation of that sensory input is nothing more than a construct, a kind of algorithm program mostly geared for biological survival rather than seeing what is true. Just this year, scientists acknowledge that other dimensions exist. We just, at this point, have no access to them. What is others have access to us? What is others have access to us? I don't know what I was trying to say there. What if time travel was made possible in the future and our reality is accidentally shifting here and there? It seems all too apparent that the brain-mind reality filter has taken humanity to a brink of self-destruction, from ecosystem suicide to nuclear gamesmanship. Maybe the Mandela effect is here to jolt enough of us awake at the same time that in the nick of time, humanity course corrects. After all, if you remember 4 people in the JFK assassination convertible, or Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father," or the children's book being called The Berenstain or Berenstain Bears, then you are Mandela affected. And just maybe it's time to ask yourself why you are remembering a reality that is no longer here, while some folks think everything is as it always was. After all, like gravity-defying Neo or walking on water Jesus, once you figure out the rules of the Matrix, anything is possible. So what do you guys think? I know Yardley's like, baloney! I can already tell.
Yeah, he's highlighting stuff. I want to hear from him.
Oh, no. Well, no, I was actually, it was the part where the person was saying that people seem incredibly threatened by the possibility of reality being flimsy enough to shift certain things, or, instead of thinking that it's fickle. I think more people think that the universe is fickle, to be honest with you. I don't think that most people are threatened by that possibility. I just think that, if you just live life, things are fickle.
Yeah, but
And
you'll get a lot of people angry though when people say, "No, I remember it this way." And people will
yeah.
get angry at you, and it's like, "Listen, you have your reality, I have mine." But they don't want to think that we're not in control, and it freaks them out, and they'll get angry and argue with you. And for me, I think it is what it is, just like you.
Yeah, I can dig it.
You know, that's the same thing that you'll experience with Alzheimer's patients is they'll get angry. It's not just, I mean, it's not being in control, but there's a fear in like, if this is not what's happening, then why did I think that's what's happening? Like, it's a fear of, everyone, that's why Stephen King, some of his books are his books are so great is usually it's fear of mental, like of becoming insane. It's like, okay, if I remember this a certain way and I'm absolutely 100% positive and it's not that way and that's provable, then that is scary. It's not, I don't know if it's necessarily just because they're afraid of not being in control so much as like, what if I'm batshit crazy? You have to, it makes you question yourself in a way that you didn't even think you had to question yourself, because if you remember the JFK assassination, there were 4 people, then there were, but obviously not. Like, I remember, Luke, I am your father. Now I've got to, like, my brain is exploded yet again this morning and I have to go check that out. But, I believe one person believing something so vividly and being able to express that in a way that might convince others. But collective memory of so many people being one thing when it's not, that I feel like there's something there that needs to be, that, could be addressed. And things are flexible. I'm not sure exactly how deep into this. Again, I'm usually kind of the middle ground between you guys a little bit, but I talked to 2 dead people last night, and I know that happened. And my friend, who doesn't have as much sensitivity as I did, barely was touching the Ouija board planchette and that thing was moving. Totally got like chilled, freezing, even though it was like 80 degrees out. Like, she felt the same things on a human level that I felt a little bit deeper. So, I mean, I experience deja vu way too often, and for long. It's not just like one little thing, it's for long experiences of time where I'm like, this has happened before. And when I'm experiencing it, I feel like, for lack of better explanation, that things are thinner somehow. Like, what is real and what is not is all of a sudden, like, I'm like, this is eerie. I feel like I'm in a tunnel where things are thinner because I'm seeing what I saw before. And it happens a lot. Like, literally, I've now gotten to a point with it that I can, like, stop it and tell whomever I'm in the situation with, if someone else is there, like, we have had this conversation before, and I can describe the details in the room, and it's creepy. So anyway, something's going on. I don't know what it is. I would be willing to believe there's another reality. However, if I ever see my exact doppelganger and it does see me, like that guy that saw his outside the house, I would fuck some shit up, because I would be certain that that's a demon, y'all. Like, that's what that is. It's one thing when you see yourself going about your business. It's another when you see yourself, like, coming to talk to your child. Nope, nobody, nope. Yeah. So those are my final thoughts.
Okay. There was actually a movie I watched, and I think it was more about the actual story of this person, but it's called Another Earth. And it was really interesting because on top of the craziness of this girl's actual life and her behavior, they are also, in the movie, is they have found the existence of another dimension, and that Earth is now appears in the sky. And they send people on trips to that Earth to meet their other person. And you can win it, and it's like a contest. And so this girl wins her trip to Earth, the other Earth, but she doesn't take it. And the ending is really crazy. And it gives me the chills just thinking about it. So if you want to watch a really interesting movie about that has this as concept in it, it's not all about this, but that is addressed. Watch it. It's really interesting. So, Yardley, you have any more thoughts or deep thoughts by Yardley?
No, I mean, well, you know what? Well, no, I just appreciate that you picked this as a topic, because there are certain, some of these stories, as I mentioned earlier, just things that, I can say, hey, you know what? Those types of things have happened to me. And I'm with both of you. I don't, I'm pretty much open. I'm open to, lots of different things. So my whole thing is that, there are a lot of things that we want to accept as something else that are provable. And I know there's only so much that you can prove. Anything that's got anything to do with consciousness, your spirit, and all of these things, these are immeasurable things. And I think there's a lot of things that kind of go on. But this subject matter is, I always find it kind of cool. Now, there are some, and both of you probably agree with this. You read some stories and you're like, this is just some total bullshit, that somebody's just writing some some crazy fiction. But then there are some things that kind of touch you because you're like, you know what, this type of situation happened to me as well. So a couple of these stories kind of resonate with me just based off of that. So it's definitely, and you mentioned it earlier when you were doing the show notes and the research. I mean, you dive into this stuff, and the next thing you know, you've dedicated way more hours than you might have intended.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
I read so many stories, and the crazy part is I had heard about the Berenstain, and I had heard of Shazam because it involved me. You know, it affected me. But some of these, I was just blown away, like the Queen one and the Mona Lisa one. Like, no, I remember it this way. Like, and then you think, oh, okay, I'm just crazy. But then you start reading people literally no, and there's so many. So it's like, it's so many people that it gives you like this, what's going on here kind of feeling. So very bizarre.
So both of you were pretty much agreeing. I always, when I was growing up, when you were mentioning you were saying Berenstain Bears, I always remembered it as Berenstain Bears.
I remember it Berenstain.
The way that it's, spelled, but I have heard a lot of people say it the way, that you're saying it now or whatever. But I've always remembered it that way. But it's kind of interesting, this conspiracy theories and stuff behind that as well. But you're right, that is a trip. I mean, and this stuff is going to be something that these types of things are going to be things that people are going to be talking about and arguing about forever, even though facts, what was that saying with the drug? The mind is a terrible thing to waste. And sometimes you just have to take off the waste. Sometimes the mind is a terrible thing because it'll freak you out, altogether. But the great topic. And I was happy to talk about this one today.
I'm glad.
Yeah, it was super fun.
All right, Moni, you want to head real quick? I know you got to head out, and I will finish. Me and Yardley will finish up, but talk about what next week's show is.
Sure. Some coworkers and someone texted about, oh my God, the reading Pinocchio book is a nightmare. And we're like, well, the movie's no picnic either. And then we kind of started talking about the freaking horrors of children's stories, Grimm fairy tales, which most people know are grim. But also, like, all folk tales and fairy tales are really just, cautionary things that are really horrific for kids around the world, dating back centuries. And so I want to talk next week about the dark side of folklore, even some of the cute little nursery rhyme songs that we've all sang to our children and had our parents sang to us. I had trouble finding a movie that we could all watch, but one is called Hard Candy, and it actually has Patrick Stewart, I'm blanking right now. The girl who played Juno back in the day.
Ellen Page. Yeah, I've seen this movie.
Yeah, Ellen Page and Sandra Oh. And it's not available on Netflix or Amazon, so I gave you the YouTube link here. But it's not a movie review. We are going to, kind of like today, read some of the folklore stories and what they're really based off of.
Awesome. Okay. Do you want to give your closing media real quick before you leave?
Sure. I am Moni Bear on Instagram and Rebel Moni, Mony, on Twitter. And I look forward to seeing you guys there. And I'm going to take off, but thanks everybody for listening. And this was a great show.
Awesome. So I just want to give a shout out really quick. We always say thank you for following, but as I always look in, I like to peek in and see who's downloading our stuff. And apparently we're really big in the UK and Australia. So shout out to you guys and thanks for listening. I don't know if y'all are just listening because you like to make fun of Americans and we probably get a lot of rousing jokes, or if you truly are interested in weird shit. But regardless, you can hate listen or you can have fun and get creeped out with us. But thank you for listening. And Yardley, would you like to give your social media handles and everything?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at militant_marker. And you can also go to indieradio.org, where we do the Spotlight Hollywood edition, Talking Terror, which is Dan Simmons' book. And we have a lot of other content, whether or not you want relationship shows all the way down to The Walking Dead or Fear the Walking Dead. Kente and some other hosts handle that, but you can definitely catch me on a spot like Hollywood Edition, Talking Hell on Wheels, Talking Terror. Just go to indieradio.org and get your listen on.
Do you guys do Game of Thrones stuff too?
No, usually I am on the Behind the Iron Throne podcast during the season.
Yeah.
When the episodes are normally airing. So I haven't really been doing any content. I think I did like one show between the last season of Game of Thrones and now. I jumped on it. It was, I don't know, a few months back. But that content, at least with me on it, will be happening probably next summer when the next season airs. Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, I know you're all about them thrones, Christy. So we'll probably, I would definitely be cool if we just, if we did a little something every now and then talking about it. That'd be great because there's only 6 episodes left.
Oh, I am gonna absolutely have withdrawals when that show ends. I heard they're doing a spin-off, but those are never the same. It's so frustrating. Anyway, all right. Well, you can find me at Creepin' Christy on Instagram or at Creepin_it on Twitter. Y'all come find us on Twitter. We have all these listeners, and I never hear a peep out of you out on Twitter. So if you have a Twitter account, come find us and come say hi, because we'd love to hear from you. And with that, everybody, keep it real. See ya.
Chief. Man, peace out to Esco. Hey yo, no doubt the rest know about the tragic of the magic going tenfold presto. Still fighting for the handle in this quest to be the keeper in the age of web pages. Still the bigger sleeper. Deeper's not enough, we gotta wait until we're drowning. Glancing at the news and make our face with the frowning. Towning in the country, zones for the comforts. What one sees is a world away, still on the same planet. The seeds and the granite, manic as a bangle, viewed from one angle. The mangles in the presses, it's the meal left to guesses. Mob design, steam blows from the stresses. Next to messes, like our chests rockin' S's. Standing around like our time is so precious. Less is not an option, just drop to